picture this. You have a child in first grade. They just got off the bus and are running to you saying, guess what? We had a book fair today and I got 3 books. Brown Bear, Diver Wimpy Kid, and Frog and Toad. You probably remember times like this where you and your 6-year-old were both super happy and your children were so excited to show off their reading skills to you. Now picture your child as a 12th grader doing that same thing. Right, you can't. Okay, now picture that same first grader sitting on a rug crisscross and the teacher reading Because of Winn-Dixie to them. The first grader is so excited and that Opal and Winn-Dixie are happy with their new lives. They're relaxed and lost in their teacher's voice. Now picture that same 16 plus 17-year-old from before, excited that Hester Prynne has to wear an A in her chest. It just doesn't give the same excitement as it once did before. But where has the excitement been lost? How do we reinvent reading for teens today? Let's start with some factors as to why teens may start to resent reading. Homework. How does homework relate to the love of reading? Picturing that first grader, they love it. They're excited to go home and read this new cool book they picked out. They're excited they may get to read with their parents. That 16-year-old though, yeah, maybe not so much. When reading becomes homework, it also becomes stressful. Rather than being graded on just reading, we're graded on the details of the books. When someone is reading with a stressed mind, that person may miss something or have a fear that they miss something, compromising the reading experience. Class time comes and the student can't answer the teacher's question, and they are now in defeat that they didn't get it right the first time. It's hard to have a love for reading when it becomes a white and black test. No imagination required. I understand that's the way things are, but could this be a contributing factor as to why, according to a study from the Reporter, 38 out of 63 anonymously surveyed AP English 12 students admitted to using SparkNotes in addition to reading the book, and 11 students said they only use SparkNotes. In all, nearly 78% of all surveyed use SparkNotes in some form. Tests are so focused on irony and metaphors that students look to resources like SparkNotes and CliffNotes. English tests aren't always about the big picture, but the small details that you can find online, leading students to finding a way out. When I was younger, I used to read all the time, on the way to soccer practice or before I fell asleep. Even now, I continue to do the same. On the bus rides to a game, free time in school, or anywhere that gives me a sense of relaxation. Now, some of my classmates might say things like, that's boring, you're wasting your time, I can never do that, etc. I think one of the considerable reasons is because they are so used to the books that we are forced to read in school that they haven't found something that piques their interest. This brings me to the challenging question of, should we force kids to strictly read classic literature, or should we incorporate current novels when they get into high school? I think we should do a mixture of both. Macbeth, Romeo and Juliet, Great Gatsby, or The Scarlet Letter are all very popular and well written, but students today don't always necessarily think the same. These books don't relate to them as the characters may be older, it was an older time period, or the book is just dull, leading to the idea of these books being boring for older students. These classics shouldn't necessarily have to be boring though. The way it is taught is what makes children dislike these books. We are given questions that kind of limit our brains. Now, how do we help that? Can we still keep the same curriculum of these classics but add something else? I say yes. I say we start including new books that are written from generations closer to us. I'm not talking about books recommended on TikTok where the guy's part of a mafia, but books that are well written and address current issues. Sometimes we focus a lot on the history of things, so we forget there are current issues as well. The English curriculum targets a small portion of the student population when in reality, we should be working towards incorporating things that work for the new generations. There's books like The Hate You Give, Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine, Small Great Things, and so many more. These are not only well written, but they teach readers so many important things that help us currently to increase our awareness of what is in our lives. Mental illness, racism, privilege, justice, etc. are all topics that are brought up in these books. We should learn from the past and from these books, and a part of that should be that what may have worked 100 years ago doesn't necessarily mean it will work now. Although I don't always love the books assigned in class, I also have still kept my love for reading, and it has even extended since my younger years. Why? Well, one reason is that I was able to find books that I love. That has been through the help of some of my teachers in my elementary and middle school years. The minute they found out that I loved to read, they recommended books that weren't painful to get through. But when other students don't really have that interest, they're not given the same suggestions. It's not their fault though, it can be a number of factors. They haven't found the right book, they need general or specific reading strategies, they're intimidated, they don't have the right fiber space, and so much more. Rather than helping this, they turn to something else, something like TVs. According to the American Psychological Association, nearly half the 12th graders said they watched 3 or more hours of television a day. Almost a third of this group reported spending little or no time reading for pleasure. This has a jarring effect on the students. Not only does it affect their love for reading, it affects their reading comprehension as well. It limits these students' vocabulary, and if they were exposed to TV at a young age, it could even have left them with language delays. Kids from families that have a TV on a lot spend less time reading and being read to, and are therefore less likely able to read, according to the Fort Dodge Community Foundation. It's such a varying difference, and part of that comes from the access to what can be considered easier material. If the book has been turned into a show or movie, they might as well watch it, especially if they have no interest in the book they were assigned to. We've been exposed to visuals that are much more developed than Shakespeare novels. Comparing things like Marvel movies to class-assigned books, it's not surprising that it doesn't make teens scream, "Yeah, I get to go home and do these English assignments." In comparison to high school students, 2/3 of the fourth graders reported taking books out of the library on a weekly basis, and only 12% of the high school students checked books out that often. If we think about that first grader and why they're so excited, we also don't realize the habits and changes they are brought to as they become those high school students. There is such a drastic difference, and why is this? How come these assigned books are so boring to students? Which now is the time to get into the world of phones and social media and how that affects the love of reading. As we know, attention spans have decreased a lot with the use of phones. I'm sure almost all teens can attest to doing an assignment, and if they hear their phone buzz, they will quickly reach for it. Whether it's a text, snap notification, etc., we are going to pick it up because it's what draws our attention, whether we want it to or not. I even had trouble staying away from my phone to write this. That little ding sends a stress hormone like cortisol, which puts us in a high state of alertness. By picking up the phone, we produce a little dopamine, that little happy neurotransmitter that makes us addicted to the use of screens. Unlike the boring book you may have been assigned to read, you can just skip through the content on your phone until you find something you want to see. This challenge can apply to older generations as well. With everything going on in a day, sometimes it's hard to put the phone down and pick a book up when you just want to mindlessly scroll, especially if the book isn't all too good. But even if it is, phones have taken over. Although, could these screens help us bring back the love for reading? Ebooks are a fairly new and commonly used way to access books online. There are so many benefits to using ebooks. They're easily portable, learning styles can be accommodated, bookmarking and highlighting important information is easier for students, and affordability trumps those of paper. There's no doubt that this can help kids learn in the way that works best for them. Due to how new this reading style is, it may be years before we actually know the benefits. But for the short term, we know that there are benefits to both ebooks and physical books. But it comes down to how you interact with the kids and make sure they are learning from it. Still be excited with them. Think of that first grader and make the ebooks interactive and have them excited for screen time for the books. With what we have now, it might be hard to bring back strictly paper books into our lives. Instead, we could use the digital books to our advantage. Instead of watching a YouTube video, open a digital book and get lost into that. Instead of scrolling through Instagram, open the Kindle app and pick up that book that you've been waiting to read for years. It sounds easier said than done, but I have no doubt that if we want to, we can help these kids keep the love for books until their teenage years with all the resources we have. Find those books that make students think. Create assignments that have more value than a test. Use technology as an advantage. This topic isn't newly discovered, but it's one that needs to be addressed in order to hold on to that joy we all had in first grade. Thank you.